What is going on, everybody? In this video, we're providing a state of the market and stock picks for January 26, 2023. So if that sounds like something you're interested in, consider subscribing as we do provide daily and weekly updates to get you prepared for the day and the week ahead in this lovely market. So Tesla earnings, big earnings. Tesla really just beat expectations by a little bit, so not really that much better than Microsoft yesterday, but but nonetheless, Tesla essentially beat expectations of 1.12 revenue and came in with a 1.19, and a 24.3 billion beats expectations of 24.1. So they barely beat. And this is what we saw from Microsoft, which isn't really good, right? Considering that the dollar is extremely high, they're essentially still on track to roll out the Cybertruck at the end of the year. Um, there's a lot of things that are still very shaky, and Elon is always comes into every situation essentially looking more for the positive outcome of things, and he's never really negative. Now you have some CEOs that will just come out and say yeah, it looks really bad, but Elon's always been very positive for just about everything, even when it's bad. And so that's obviously uh, goes into his success in life. But with that being said, I think that helps a lot, because a lot of, even Microsoft yesterday, the verbiage that was used from the CEO did not help and tanked, obviously, cloud. Everything pops right back up, though, today. But we'll see again how we open. Just like yesterday, I made that video, and then no later than an hour later, Microsoft was tanking. Cloud space was tanking. It tanked really hard this morning. Then everything bounced right back, because now we're back on track for, I guess, another 75 or 25-point basis move again, and all is well with the world. Which again, you have to be very pivotal. BA didn't do well this morning. Lamb Research did not do well. Now, again, another cloud space did not do well. It's a big issue. So we're going to try to ride out whatever happens of this wave. Again, something I've talked about after next week, once we get Amazon, Apple, and Google out of the way, which I'm not expecting good earnings from Google. I'm not expecting good earnings from Amazon. Apple's debatable. They've always seemed to pull it out just like Tesla, but I expect another mediocre earning. And hopefully they don't say anything bad in the call, because that's where hopium dies. So nonetheless, we will see what happens going in the next couple. I'm just excited because I like seeing the markets have big moves like this. This is what I wait for, is these bigger moves. And I'm tired essentially in between the earnings phase, because you don't get a lot of big moves unless there's big news, which doesn't happen all the time. Even though we've been getting big moves essentially coming from monetary policy. Normally we get a pre-earnings move, but right now everything's just consolidated into these short weeks in between monetary policy and other big data sets that come out. So with all that being said, looking forward to tomorrow. We'll see. Tesla, again, there are going to be a lot of upgrades and downgrades tomorrow. Those are going to be really some big things to watch. Tesla, obviously, I think will be upgraded tomorrow. This thing could be really explosive. If this thing does open up over 155 tomorrow, this thing could potentially shoot up to 170. Strong possibility if it does. If not, if it gets rejected and comes back down, in my opinion, that's not a good sign. If Tesla's back down here at the 138 tomorrow, again, that's going to be an issue. The market doesn't have strength. There is no strength there. Again, if the dollar is screaming as high as it is, and you're not really making out, or blowing competition out of the water, that means you're barely skating by the skin of your teeth. That's not a good thing. So again, we will see Q2, Q3. At some point, something's going to snap and break. Again, a lot of people laying off just to make par. So that should be telling you something when the dollar is so high. So with all that being said, we shall see. Again, verbiage means a lot in calls. So we'll see. But Let's jump over to the SPX. So the SPX is still, it still needs to break that 440, but if it does break that again, 4100, could have a nice play towards the back half from Thursday and Friday, going into some sort of rally. Again, you have to be mindful that monetary policy is next week. If this thesis about we only have a 25-point basis move is true, it might help fuel that again. We'll see. Again, next week, if they come in a 50-point basis move, souls are going to be crushed next week. And so are the markets. But if they come in line with 25 points, might continue this rally for a little bit. Again, just to be mindful, normal cycle stuff starts to sell off here in February, March. Then we get in our normal decline cycle. But again, one thing, again, you have to really keep in mind, I'm not opposed to going with this trend. Again, I've always said you have to be adjustable, and there's no real bad new news. People are expecting stuff. Expectations are extremely low. So people are going off of expectations. And if they're hitting, all is fine with the world. So that's what we have to judge our next move. And since I play a lot of intraday, I have to be adjustable to that. And I have to be mindful of that and then get ready for the setup. Is this pivotal? I don't think it's pivotal. I think we got more downside. I think something's going to happen. Something's going to snap. That pivotal event that sends us down will be the one thing that I can say, okay, now we could pivot to the upside. But until that happens, again, I'm not believing in any of these hopium spikes. It's not saying I won't play them. I will play them. My favorite gap play is if it gaps up tomorrow, there's going to be a lot of momentum pushing to the upside, and that's what I'm going to play, especially tomorrow. Some more hopium. We do have credit cards tomorrow. Again, credit cards aren't going to move the market at all, but I want to see what the growth rate is on credit cards and see if my thesis is continuing to solidify. Again, if something changes there, then I will start thinking potentially about adjusting. I'm not opposed to adjusting my thesis either, but right now, my thesis is pretty strong on something bigger happening here when all this hopium army is pushing this thing up. But we'll see, right? So we wait and we see. If we do break again 440, again, we could scream up to the 4100 tomorrow, potentially even up to the 4150. It really depends on how much momentum we get in the morning, but we will see. Again, if we do break back down below, it's going to be an issue. This 4012. There's been monthly and weekly support here, even the 200 EMA daily, and this thing has just been buttering between them both. So it's obviously this morning we woke up in a gap straight down over it. This morning just ripped right back up. So we'll see what happens. Maybe the market will hold it under the 4040 tomorrow. But again, how we open is going to matter. Right now, it doesn't matter that Tesla's pushing. What matters is what happens in the overnight session, the digestion. Do we wake up and Tesla's gap down? Is a question. Again, last night, excited about push to the upside, and it just gapped down. So I played the gap. I played down the downside today. Had a nice screaming rip to the downside, and same for tomorrow. Tomorrow's going to feed a nice potentially screaming rip to the upside. But again, there's nothing fancy about what Tesla did. Just be mindful of that. Expectations are just barely skating by the skin of your teeth. Good enough. We'll find out tomorrow. But let's see. What else do we got? We got Bitcoin. Bitcoin, again, trying to break. It did touch the 200 EMA. Let me pump back to the daily here. So this looks a little bit better here. Again, first attempt to do this in quite a while. So it does need to break this. I'm not really sure if we will have enough momentum. Again, it depends on the market. Could potentially scream up to 30K. Again, really just depends on what the sentiment of the market in general and what's happening. But again, I'm not opposed to playing to the upside, whatever the case is. I'm waiting for a bigger move. Maybe that's delayed. Maybe I missed out on the bottom, but I'd rather have confirmation than just jumping in and assuming that we're just going to go back to all-time highs. The dollar, again, still holding above the 100. This has been a pretty nasty grind. It's continuing to show more signs of a bull. But again, you have to be very, very careful. All it's going to take is one event and this whole thing just get blown out of proportion. And that's what I'm afraid is what's going to happen with people is that one event it's just going to absolutely obliterate people. And it may not, but there's a good chance that it could. And again, none of this is financial advice, but I think there's a really good chance that something's going to drop, and then it's going to make the whole market drop. Again, you got high rates. You got a lot of people that are liquidating a lot of different assets. At what point does that break and break something? And so you have to be mindful of that. So we'll see on the dollar, Bitcoin. We already went over Tesla, Apple. I'll see how Apple does. Apple needs to hold again above the 141. Pretty nice little grind up, but needs to break above the 144 essentially to really keep going. Then potentially the 150. Again, Tesla or Apple's not a huge mover, but it's normally pretty consistent. Again, the multiple stock splits do help it. So that's good, and it does recover very well. But we'll have to see again next week is a different story. So we're gonna have to see again Q4. We'll see what happens, especially with the China stuff. Now had earnings today. Drop down to the 1 hour here, so you kind of see this again. Services not great, but again the cloud space is not great. But being said, the CEO didn't come out and say something negative or say the wrong words that essentially would make it drop out of the sky. So we'll have to see how cloud is again doing tomorrow. Again, I really see Amazon getting hit bad again, but we'll see. It'll run nonetheless. ASML and Lamb Research. Let me see if I find Lamb Research after hours. Get another earnings play. Chips really undecided, right? Like things are barely skating by the teeth. Like there's nothing real positive about that. So to say that we're going to get some really good growth this year, I think you would be shooting yourself in the foot if you said that, because things aren't looking good, right? Like you're getting rid of the workforce. It's great for your earnings, so you can make par. But what are you going to do when you start losing that productivity, right? This is when innovation, and as long as these companies can innovate, the only company that's really been able to do that has been Tesla. They're always innovating. Amazon has lost it since essentially the man himself has left. So he left at the top. So nonetheless, we'll see. BA had earnings this morning. Tanked this morning, came right back up. I think their expectation for BA2 was that actually it was going to go positive, and it still missed. So again, still rattling around. I think it's just a matter of time before these things crash, right? Again, parabolic move and still just holding. So it needs to break again out of 215. It needs to hold the 202. We'll see what happens there. Banks again, same thing, holding pattern. JPM playing roughly between the 133 and roughly the 143. So it's going to continue to hold there. We'll see what happens. Goldman Sachs holding pattern. Again, as long as this thing doesn't start selling off, it wants to hold, that's fine. The market will rip if tech starts and wants to rip, because tech has, like I said, financials and value have the meat to the downside. If we do start selling and they start selling, they will provide the gas. Big tech has the meat to the upside if we want to start ripping. Now, if tech wants to start ripping, the market will rip. I think, again, tech is extremely weak. So any kind of massive rip to the upside would be great. But I think it will be very short-lived. So you just have to be careful with whatever rip does do that. Again, I could be wrong. Again, my thesis, there's a lot of things that are still pointing that my thesis is pretty solid. It hasn't made me think differently than what it currently is right now. And until I see something change, nothing is showing. The earnings I've seen so far, nothing is proved to me that things have changed. Until I see that in earnings, then I will make a pivot. But I'm not seeing that, because everything I see in earnings so far is more so something's going to break, and that's going to cause the market to crash another 15 to 20%. At that point, the market can pivot. Once that event's out of the way and in the clear, it kind of null and voids all the other potential events that could happen, and then the market would recover from that point, in my opinion. And then we would have a real pivot before the Fed actually pivoted and started decreasing rates at that point. Right now, the market's moving on the hopium with the 25-point basis move. I can see that move rolling out a couple 25-point basis moves for the next 3 months. Potentially, I can see that 50-point basis moves. I think is going to be a kind of a gut shot to the market if that does happen. But again, for whatever reason, we don't really talk about inflation that much anymore. I don't point to the core as much anymore, but if the core starts running, there could be a really possibility that that does start happening again. If that happens, you're back to 50-point basis moves at that point. Again, depending on how quick it does jump. If it does jump, just be mindful that it's something that's always on the plate for the next potential at least couple months, maybe even a couple of years. This is why the Fed is going to hold rates at a high at 5% until something changes. So again, we want it as close to 2. They're expecting maybe 3-ish is probably going to be the average. I would agree with that inflation will be no longer at 2%, but potentially more, the average being around 3. But we'll see. We'll see how things play out, and we'll go from there. So if you made it this far, I do appreciate you. Go ahead and drop a like button. Till next time, I'll see you guys later.